everyone, welcome back to Real Simple. This month we are going to be talking about showings. So showing a house is more than just walking through a house, seeing if you like the feel, the layout, that kind of stuff. Obviously that is very important when you are looking at houses, but I like to walk my clients through digging a little deeper, especially into the houses that they really, really like. Any big repairs or stuff like that needs to be done can be found if we go under contract and then you get an inspection done, which we're going to talk about next month. But if we can kind of avoid some of that ahead of time, so that if we found stuff later in the inspection that the sellers would agree to fix and was a deal breaker for you, then that could put you back another month or so in finding your house. So some things that we look at when we walk through a house is any red flags. So I'm looking at corners of the walls, especially corners along the seams of the ceiling, that kind of stuff, for any kind of water damage. If you do see, especially on the upper level, if you do see some water damage or stains on the paint or anything like that, then that could indicate that there's a roof problem or there was a roof problem at some point. So you would want to get information on that from the listing agent before we write a contract. Another thing, as far as water damage goes, I'm going to be looking under a lot of the cabinets. So looking under the sinks, looking at the ceiling, under where a bathtub would be. We've run into a couple houses with clients where a bathtub has been leaking and you could see that. So water damage is a big one, and we want to see if it has been fixed and if there's anything that the sellers have in the process to fix it, if they know about it, that kind of stuff. Another thing that we're going to be looking at is if you are getting an FHA loan, there are some things that have to be in order to be FHA compliant. So when the FHA appraiser comes in, not only are they appraising the house, but they're also looking for these things to make sure that the house is worth backing, essentially. So conventional loans, you don't have to worry about that, but the government-backed loans, FHA, especially a little bit of VA, you're wanting to look at these things. So if there's any sections that are missing floor, if you're seeing the subfloor, that's a no-go for FHA. And peeling paint, those are two of the big ones. So if you see any peeling paint in the house, if it's an older house or outside of the house, that's a no-go for FHA. So those are some things to look at if you are getting an FHA loan. I also make sure to walk through the utility room with my clients and check the dates of the furnace and the water heater. If it's within a few years, obviously that's really good to go. If your water heater is upwards of 10 years old, then we'll want information on if the seller plans on replacing it, how they feel about that kind of stuff, if they've had it looked at. Same with the furnace. I always ask the listing agent if the furnace has been serviced. If not, that's usually something I recommend. I also, if it's an older home, especially if it's built in the 70s, then I always go and check the breaker box. So if it's a current, up to code, newer, modern breaker box, then you're good. But if it's any of the older breaker boxes, then the inspector's most likely going to flag that because it could be deemed unsafe. So I always, especially for the older homes, go through to see if that breaker box has been updated. If not, again, are the sellers willing to pay to replace that or have it replaced before closing? If not, you could be looking anywhere, maybe $1,500 to $3,000. I know that's a big range. So, and depending on how much needs to go into transferring all that in the house to the new breaker box, it can get kind of pricey. So that's one thing we're going to look at. I also encourage you to drive through the neighborhood. So again, this is where you're going to be living, not just in the house, but outside of the house, right? So what does the neighborhood look like? How does it feel? That kind of thing. You can get a lot from just driving around, seeing other neighbors, seeing what other houses look like in the neighborhood, how it's maintained, all that stuff. A lot of the neighborhoods with the HOAs obviously might look nicer than neighborhoods without HOAs because there's usually rules about, keeping the property looking nice. But I definitely recommend driving through the neighborhood, especially on the homes that you're super, super interested in. just to see if it would be a good fit for your lifestyle. If a neighborhood does have an HOA, then we can usually go through and walk through the amenities. So like if there's a pool, we can go through and walk to see the pool. If there's like a weight room, any rec centers, that kind of stuff, a lot of the neighborhoods, if you are looking at buying in that neighborhood, will allow you to walk through and kind of see what the amenities look like. If you think that you will be using the amenities, which if you're going to be paying that higher HOA, you probably are, then I definitely recommend looking at those as well. Those are just as much as part of the showing as the house is, because you want something that you would like to use if you're paying for it. Some other things to think about as you're walking through a house: how much maintenance do you want to do as far as the yard goes? So when we're looking at the front yard and the backyard, is there a lot of sod, weeds, that kind of stuff? Are you willing to maintain that? Or are you going to end up wanting a lesser maintenance kind of yard once we look at those? So yard maintenance, what that looks like for you, how you feel about that. Another thing is parking. So whatever your parking situation is, if you have 5 kids and they all have cars and are driving, what kind of like garage space are you going to need? What kind of driveway space are you going to need? Street parking, if it's allowed in the HOA. So we'll look at those things, and as you look at the house, kind of visualize what that's going to look like for you and if that's going to work for you and your family. Another thing that you're going to want to kind of think about as you're walking through a house is cost of repairs. So if there's like little cosmetic things, are you willing to do some cosmetic repairs? If not, obviously we're going to steer away from those homes and get like a newer home or something that's been newly renovated, that kind of stuff. But if you're willing to kind of see past like paint colors, possibly floor. I mean, flooring can be a little more expensive. Sometimes we can ask for some floor reimbursement or whatever seller concessions in the contract if like the carpet is in bad shape and needs to be replaced. If you like the layout and everything, can we see past the like Pepto-Bismol pink bedroom and, paint that ourselves when you close on the house? So all things to think about when I'm showing a house, things I like to point out to my clients. It's not just like walking through, seeing how it feels, seeing if you like the layout, like, oh, this is really pretty, I really like this. There could be some red flags deeper in. Anyway, that's that. Next month, we are going to talk about inspections. So we go under contract and we have the inspector to come in to look at these red flags, find other things that could be a potential problem or not, and then kind of what we do with that. So I'm going to explain that process. So thank you for watching and tuning in to Real Simple. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at J Turbes Real Estate, and I will see you all next month.